At the opening of the trial of Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes and 4 others, prosecutor Jeff Nessel accused the defendants of concocting a plan for an armed rebellion to, quote, shatter a bedrock of American democracy. The group faces numerous felony charges for their roles in the storming of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, including seditious conspiracy, a Civil War-era statute that is rarely prosecuted and carries a statutory maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Prosecutors have said the 5 defendants trained and planned for January 6, stockpiling weapons at a Northern Virginia hotel outside the Capitol for a so-called quick reaction force. If called upon, they would be ready to transport arms into Washington. The 5 on trial are accused of plotting to forcefully prevent Congress from certifying President Joe Biden's 2020 election victory in favor of keeping then-President Donald Trump in power. The jury was shown a message Rhodes has sent to his followers. In it, he refers to Congress and writes, quote, "It will be torches and pitchforks time if they don't do the right thing." According to prosecutors, Kelly Meggs, another co-defendant, told his wife, quote, "I'm going to go on a killing spree, Pelosi first," referring to top Democrat and House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Meg's wife Connie is criminally charged in a separate case. Alan Rosenstein is a former Justice Department national security lawyer and University of Minnesota Law School professor. He calls the sedition charge one of the most serious available in federal law.
For the government to label something seditious conspiracy, it's not just saying that it was illegal or even that it was violent, but that it was, in a sense, an attack on the very nature of American government and on American democracy. The government's quite selective when it wants to go beyond simply saying this was violent, this used force, this was illegal, and to say, and also it was seditious conspiracy.
The government has characterized the Oath Keepers as a far-right anti-government group, some of whose members have ties to militias. Some of the members include current and former military and law enforcement personnel. Rhodes has disputed that characterization, saying it's a nonpartisan group whose members have pledged to defend the U.S. Constitution. His attorney says his client is, quote, extremely patriotic, and would take the stand to explain his side of the story.
Search and rescue teams in Florida were doubling back to check on tens of thousands of homes and businesses along the Gulf Coast on Monday after completing an initial search of the area ravaged by Hurricane Ian, one of the most powerful storms ever to strike the United States.
We have had people check every address.
Kevin Guthrie, Florida's emergency management director, said the first responders have visited about 45,000 homes and businesses.
We've been to just about every address at least once, and now the CFO's office with his teams are going back and doing a second look at every single location.
Since Ian crashed ashore with winds of 150 miles per hour, at least 85 deaths have been attributed to the storm.
I'm not saying we're not going to find anybody else. I don't want to put that context out there. We may find other people.
More than half of the reported fatalities occurred in coastal Lee County, which includes Fort Myers and Cape Coral. County officials there have come under fire for waiting to evacuate. Despite days of warnings that Hurricane Ian was bearing down on Florida's Gulf Coast, officials in Lee County, the storm's eventual ground zero, issued mandatory evacuation orders on September 27th, one day before it made landfall, while counties to the north ordered evacuations on September 26th, shortly after the National Hurricane Center had forecast a storm surge of 4 to 7 feet. Guthrie on Monday stood by the decisions he said were made by local authorities.
Was there a lack of urgency at that point to move forward with evacuations in these low-lying areas of Fort Myers, Sanibel, and beyond?
Emergency management directors do not have a crystal ball. I believe that Lee County and their administration, to include their emergency management director, fire chiefs, and sheriff, made the best decision they felt was right for their community at that time.
As crews worked to restore power to some 600,000 homes and businesses, Colonel Gene Spalding, head of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, warned residents to stay off the roads.
We still have several roadways that are underwater. Keep in mind that just because the water recedes don't necessarily mean the roadway is safe to travel on.
U.S. property data and analytics company CoreLogic on Friday pegged insured losses for Florida between $28 billion and $47 billion from Hurricane Ian in what could be the costliest storm for the state since Hurricane Andrew in 1992. And while hundreds of people stranded by the storm have been rescued, the death toll is expected to keep rising as search teams reach more areas cut off by floodwaters and debris.
In his 21 years of mining coal in Mexico's northern state of Coahuila, Juan Briones plunges more than 330 feet below ground at times, with just a helmet.
When you're winched down, rocks can fall over, and some down it at brutal speed. They can topple onto your head and hurt you. The helmet is your only protection, but if big stones fall, you can be knocked over. The second danger is gas, as there can be explosions.
There are few other jobs in Mexico's mining heartland. Briones, a father of 4, has few other ways to make a similar living. He gets $135 a week if he hoists 18 tons of coal above ground. If he could deliver an extra 2 tons, he gets $165, an incentive to push his body harder and faster.
Sometimes you have the need to survive, to take care of your family as your children demand, and they don't know if there is money or there isn't. For this reason, you get in the mine, but you get to know how to preserve your security.
Briones even kept showing up to work after flooding at the nearby El Pinabete mine left his brother-in-law and 9 others trapped. Officials are now looking for bodies. The stymied rescue efforts there turn attention to the dangers miners face every day at dozens of small, unregulated work sites. Briones said his brother-in-law had encouraged him to take a job at El Pinabete too, but he turned it down, knowing the peril posed by giant pools of water in surrounding mines that could spill over if underground tunnel walls were to collapse.
A strong rally for U.S. stocks in an optimistic start to the fourth quarter as investors snapped up shares after a brutal month of September. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 indices both rose more than 2.5%. The Nasdaq climbed almost 2.25%. Among the day's winners, oil majors such as ExxonMobil and Chevron, both up more than 5% on a nearly $4 jump in the price of crude oil, fueled by reports that OPEC Plus is considering tightening global crude output by more than 1 million barrels per day ahead of a Wednesday meeting. But the rally was about more than just energy. Tech giants such as Apple and Microsoft climbed more than 3.5%, and bank stocks rose more than 3%. Monday's buying comes after heavy losses in the third quarter for equities against a backdrop of rising interest rates, alarming inflation, and slowing economic growth. Sam Stovall is the chief investment strategist for CFRA Research.
September is the worst month of the year, and the third quarter is the worst quarter of the year, in many ways because of the window dressing that mutual funds have to go through. In a sense, they want to get rid of the stocks that they really wish they had not owned, but let's do so before we have to report them to our shareholders. But then investors like to get back into equities early in the fourth quarter. And possibly that's what we're seeing right now is money being put back to work, especially after such a weak month and quarter.
One notable loser on Monday, Tesla. The luxury electric car maker saw shares slide 7.5% after it sold fewer than expected vehicles in the third quarter due to logistic hurdles.
More than 50 years after gangrene left Hryhoriy Yanchenko without legs and fingers, he's showing his fighting spirit remains intact by joining the Ukrainian resistance in occupied Kherson. These videos shared on social media in June show the 75-year-old driving his mobility cart through the city, playing the Ukrainian anthem and collecting donations for soldiers. He wears a blue striped jersey and sky blue beret from the Soviet paratroop unit in which he served. Reuters was able to verify the location of the videos, but not the date they were filmed.
Every day at 9 a.m., I left on my wheelchair. And every day, I felt as if I was on a minefield. You go somewhere, and you may never come back home. But I just felt like a Ukrainian. Felt like a patriot of sorts.
Yanchenko served in the Soviet airborne forces in the 1960s and has been trying to support Ukrainian soldiers since 2014, first organizing a benefit concert and then collecting food and other supplies. In the last 6 months, Yanchenko said he's raised more than $16,000. The money has been used by a Ukrainian group to buy sniper scopes, rifle accessories, and clothing. Some of the money was even donated by Russian soldiers, Yanchenko says with a laugh. But after being confronted by a member of Russia's internal security service, Yanchenko knew it was time to leave Kherson, his home for 57 years. He hid for 3 days with a friend before making a pre-dawn crossing of the Dnipro River.
You understand, I am 75 years old. I was scared that if they found my phone or laptop or saw something of the sort, I wouldn't be able to take these challenges at this age. This is all very, very frightening.
Yanchenko is now in Ukrainian-held Zaporizhia, where he continues to collect donations.